Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for tuning in for the Helen Olivia Easter workshop. And today we're going to be creating a beautiful Easter long and low that is perfect for a centerpiece on your dining table. A couple of quick things before we get started. Everyone who's participating in workshop should have received a kit, and in it you should have a birch 12-inch long and low vase, and then about 1.5 bricks of floral foam, which is this green stuff right here. You should also have a couple of Easter eggs, these are fake, and then a hyacinth stake or two, which we will use to tuck your eggs into the design. You should also have a beautiful spring bucket of flowers. And that's really all you need to design today, with the exception of a tool, some type of cutting instrument of your choosing. I'll show you what I'm designing with today. I always have a trusty floral knife, and I use the Swiss Army brand, and these come in a couple of different colors. Since the day I started designing, I've been a yellow knife girl, so that's what I like to use. And then I also have a pair of ARS clippers. This is a Japanese clipper, and it's my favorite. It's great for cutting thick woody stems this time of year. So I'll kind of switch between my clippers and my knife. If you're designing at home, ideally you're using clippers, but if you don't have them, scissors are fine for just this once. But scissors are really not the greatest tool to be handling cut flowers with. So without further ado, let's get started. Your floral foam is the first thing you're going to want to prep for your design, and everyone is receiving dry bricks of foam for workshop. So you're going to take your dry brick of foam and you're going to fill a bucket or a sink or something that is large enough for the full brick to kind of submerge itself in. You want to throw the brick on top of the water surface and then back away. So you want to allow it to sink on its own. You never want to push foam under the water because you will get the outside of the brick wet, but the inside will have air pockets. So it's really important to just stick it in a sink or a bucket, walk away for 5 minutes, and then come back when it's fully soaked through. So the first brick you can take and you can just drop in fully intact as one piece. And then your second brick of foam, we're going to need to cut it into a smaller piece. So you can use any type of knife. I'm just using my floral knife. And what I like to do is take my piece of foam and just kind of measure it on the side of the vase, so I get a nice line defined on the bottom. I just press down gently, and then I cut where the line is. And that's it. So you can toss whatever little scraps you have, and you should wind up with just a really nice trim-fitting foam. It's very important anytime you design in foam that you make sure that not only is the foam really nice and wet, but that you add extra water to the vase. So I'm going to take, I have some bottled water here. I'm just going to fill my vase until it's like, I don't know, about 1 inch from the top. And it's important to have the extra water in the long and low because that's what the foam will wick up so the flowers can continue drinking. So I put almost a full bottle of water into my vase. You do not need to use bottled water. Sink water is totally fine, but just room temperature water is what I'd recommend. And that's something that you're going to want to do every day to keep your flowers really well hydrated. So the water level will drop as the flowers drink. You just need to rehydrate. So we are pretty much ready to dive into design. And with our long and low, we design in a really distinct order. So the first thing that we do with our long and low is always to pop in our hydrangea base just to kind of trace out the shape of our design. Then we're going to pop in some greenery to really fill in and give a beautiful backdrop for our flowers. And then the last thing that we will do is we'll add our flowers. So everyone should have in their buckets beautiful green hydrangea. We're using a variety called dark baby green. It's a little bit darker of a green. I find that it has a really nice long vase life and just looks like a really pretty backdrop for your flowers. So with all of our stems, we're going to want to peel away the low-lying leaves. So if you look up here, we're going to take off these two guys. And I like to leave on the leaves that kind of cup the bloom, that are really up high on the stem. So again, I'm gonna yank off these low-lying leaves, and I'm just gonna leave the 2 topmost leaves on. And you can do this with your hands, you can just rip them right off. You don't need to be using clippers to cut off the leaves. So just peeling away. And it's a quick little process. All right. So I've peeled away my leaves. If at any point you feel like I'm going too fast and you are falling behind, just push pause on the video and you can restart me when you've caught back up. So with our hydrangea, we're going to start popping these into our long and low. And there's a couple of steadfast rules when you're designing in foam. The first one is you want to make sure that you are cutting your stems long enough so the bottom of the stem sits all the way at the bottom of the vase. So just keep that in mind as you go. You want the stems really deep down so that they can drink water well. So I'm going to start with my first hydrangea, and I am going to cut it at a nice deep angle. We always like to cut our stems at an angle because it opens up a lot more surface area at the bottom of the stem and the flower gets more water. So my first cut is made, and I'm going to place my first hydrangea in one back corner of the vase. And I'm going to do the same thing with my next one. I'm going to place it in the opposite corner. Okay, so I've got hydrangea 1 and hydrangea 2 just sitting in the corners. And hydrangea 3 and hydrangea 4 are going to go in the same place, just on the opposite side. And I'm being careful to cut my stems long enough so that they're sitting towards the bottom of the vase. Okay, so now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to take my last hydrangea and I'm just going to pop them kind of in the middle of the vase. And these guys I'm keeping pretty low, so they're hugging the side of the vase. And this is kind of giving me like an outline or a traced out shape of where my long and low is going to wind up. Okay? So next up, I'm going to come behind with some pretty greenery and just fill in some of the open space in between my hydrangea. And we're using some spring favorites. So we're going to start out with our variegated ligustrum. Okay, this is from the privet family, and variegated just means that the leaves are 2 colors. So it's like a creamy, whitish yellow and green leaf, so really perfect for Easter. And we're going to start by conditioning these stems. So again, we're going to strip off any of our lower lying leaves. So I'm going to take off just about the bottom leaves and just leave a pretty little burst of leaves on top. And I'm going to cut the stem again at a nice deep angle, and I'm going to start working my ligustrum in between and around my mini green hydrangea. And if you have a really long piece of ligustrum like I do, you can even separate the stem into 2 workable pieces. Okay. And I like to extend my long and low out a little bit to each side, so I have some pretty drape from the greenery. So you can do that too. All you need to do is just extend your greenery out a little bit farther than the hydrangea. And so we're going to focus the majority of our greenery along the vase line. And the vase line is just where the foam meets the rim of the vase. We're going to do some camouflage work here because we want to hide the foam. That's not something that we want our dinner guests to be able to see, so we're focusing the majority of our greenery right along the vase line. And the rest of it, we can mix in a couple of pieces up higher, up top. And you'll notice that I'm keeping my longest pieces out the sides to elongate my long and low. And I'm keeping my shorter pieces of greenery on the sides. Okay, so I'm just going to finish cutting up my ligustrum, popping that in. And I find it's really helpful from time to time to do a spin of my vase so that I'm looking at it from all different angles. So I'm just going to do a little maneuver. So now I'm looking at a different side. we've got our ligustrum worked in. And you can even use like the really little pieces. You don't need to throw those away. You can take even tiny bits and just poke them into the foam, and that helps to give a little coverage. So next up, everyone has got Israeli ruscus, and Israeli ruscus is one of those greens that is not particularly sexy. Nobody gets excited about Israeli ruscus, but it's a good workhorse. It's cheap and it helps to fill. So with our ruscus, we can also cut these pieces into 2 or 3 smaller pieces. Again, just ripping off the low leaves. So you wind up just with a little bunch on top, and we're just gonna work this in as well. So by the time that we are done greening up our vase, which is what we're doing right now, we wanna have the majority of our foam covered up. Shouldn't be visible. All right, and I'm getting ready to do another spin of my design so that I can focus on the other side again. As far as the height of greenery, we want the tallest point to live slightly in the center, and we're going to allow it to fan or taper down on the ends. And you can decide how gardeny you want to go with your long and low. If you feel like you like something that's a little bit more organic and natural, you can certainly have some pieces of greenery that hang a little bit farther out. So you decide. All right, so I've now got my Israeli ruscus in. So ligustrum, done. Israeli ruscus, done. The next thing that we're gonna add in is our little leaf pittosporum, which is a favorite for spring. And this is coming in, we're bringing it in from a Dutch importer. It's again variegated, so it's white and green, and it's just beautiful. It's a crinkly little leaf. And we're going to cut the laterals to break it into smaller pieces. So I'm just using a clipper to separate out smaller pieces. And this greenery is so beautiful to put right at the baseline, so it kind of drapes down. So look how pretty that is. So we're going to put this all over our arrangement, just filling in the little holes that we've got and covering up our foam. So you can see half the work in making a long and low is getting enough greenery in to cover and give a really lush, full look. So this is definitely a time-consuming process to get it all popped in, but worth it for sure. So again, I'm just cutting smaller little pieces out of my larger stems. Do one more spin just to see the other side. Okay. Looking good. All right, so I think we're in business. Next up, we're going to grab our umbrella fern. This is such a unique type of fern, and of course it's named because it looks like a tiny umbrella. This is really light and feathery and just beautiful. So we're going to cut the stem, and I'm giving mine a stem that's maybe 2 or 3 inches long, and I'm just going to pop him in kind of towards the middle of my design and at a little bit of an angle. I'll show you what that looks like. So here he is. And the umbrella fern requires a little bit of finesse. So when you put your umbrella fern in at first, it's not really gonna look natural. So we're going to need to maneuver some of the leaves around it, just to tuck it. And I like to sometimes pull some of my ferns forward. So I think it looks really pretty now that I've kind of woven a few of the other stems in and around it. Umbrella fern to me looks like quintessential spring. I always think of the ferns coming out of the ground. So I always like to mix in a little bit of fern with my spring designs. So there we go. All right, so we've done the hard work. Good job. We're now ready to start with our flowers. And the first flower that I'm gonna reach for is our beautiful pink rice flower. This is such an Eastery bloom to me. It almost looks like little candy getting tucked into our design, and it's got a really nice long vase life, so it's ideal to be using in floral foam. And we're gonna take it, we're gonna cut it again so that the stem is long enough to sit towards the bottom of the vase. And for me, that's about a 5 or 6 inch length. And I'm going to just start by popping it in. I like this to sit kind of lower towards the vase line. And I'm just gonna evenly distribute it around my vase. So I'm going to position one over here. I'll put another one towards one of the ends of the long and low, and I'll put one on the back side. And then I'll give it a little spin for you to see. If you're at home and wondering what that smell is, rice flower does have a very distinct smell. May take you back to your college years. When you cut it, the inside of the stem does smell a little bit, we've been told, like marijuana. But it's a smell that goes away very quickly as soon as it goes into the vase. So don't worry about your Easter table smelling like a controlled substance. You're fine. So we're gonna go ahead and spin it just so you can see. I've got little pockets of the blush starting to fill in, and we are next ready to reach for our roses. So we've got a few different varieties of rose in our bucket. And the first that I'm gonna reach for are these gorgeous Kahala roses. And Kahala is one of those roses that's kind of like a cheap rose. So it has the appearance of a garden rose with a really high petal count and swirl, like a little swirl in the center. But it's a regular standard rose. So this is a great cheap rose. You should remember the name if you're ever looking for something that just looks more expensive but isn't. So we're going to process all of our roses by ripping off all of the leaves. And we're also going to need to attack the guard petals. And the guard petals are the outer petals on the outside of the rose, and they never look good. So that's what gets damaged during packaging and transport and growing out in the field. So we're gonna take them off. And when you handle your roses, you never wanna touch the face of the rose. That's where you can bruise the rose. So we're just gonna handle the petals on the side, and you wanna make sure that you remove the entire petal when you do this, and you'll leave behind just a nice clean rose. So we're gonna do that quickly with all of our roses. Okay. You can also, if you wanna get your roses a little bit more open, you can blow on the face of the rose, and the warmth from your breath will help to relax the petals. Or sometimes you'll see designers turn the rose head completely upside down and just spin the rose between your hands. So that'll really help to flare out the petals. So we're gonna do this with all of our roses. And depending on your speed with conditioning roses, this may be one of those points that you wanna push pause and just take time with your roses. Don't rush through them. And this is a cool peach rose. It's got warm peach tones, and then it also has some cooler peach tones towards the center. So it's just a great variety. I like the variation in color. I think it's really cool. And it's great for spring. All right, so we are now ready to start popping our roses into our long and low. So I'm gonna leave my stems like 6 or 7 inches in length, and that's for most of my roses. If I want a rose to go in the top of my design, I might even leave it like 8 to 9 inches long. So you start with longer stems and then recut if you need to. It's always easier to recut. And we're gonna start by just popping in our roses in our design. I like to, with at least one of the colors of rose, like do pretty little grouping. So I'm gonna put like a trio over here. And when we say trio, we like to include them as kind of like a pyramid or a triangle, but they don't need to be so tight that they're touching. You still get the impact of grouped flowers even if they are spaced. So don't take that too literally when we say a trio. Okay, so I'm popping in another grouping off to this side. I'll do a little spin. And then why don't we do our last grouping right here. There we go. So we've got our roses placed, and we're really starting to be able to see the shape of this long and low kind of take hold, which is fun to see it come together. All right, so we're next going to pop in our beautiful Queen's Crown Garden Roses. This is a beautiful shade of lavender and a great garden rose. These tend to be really healthy garden roses, and they're also big, full-headed garden roses. So we're gonna start by peeling our guard petals, okay? You can blow on these or do that little spinning trick if you like. And this is a newer variety of garden rose, and again, it's called Queen's Crown. It's like a pinky lavender, really perfect for Easter. We've been buying a lot of these this spring season. And again, I'm just yanking leaves off and guard petals are coming off. So I'm getting like a lot of the prep work done before I go to add them to the vase, which is super helpful. It's allowing me to be faster when I arrange by getting all of my repetitive work done at once. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut my stems again. And because we only have 3 of these and they're a garden rose, I'm not gonna group these. I'm just gonna kind of pop them in all over the design. So I've got 1, 2, and then I'm gonna pop my 3rd in on the back side. So I've kind of distributed that pretty lavender color all over the place. All right, so our last rose ingredient is going to be our gorgeous Peach Myra rose. This is another garden rose, and these will open to look a lot more impressive when they're not so new. We just imported these, so they're still quite tight. But this is a beautiful cantaloupe color, so really pretty. And they complement the other peach roses so beautifully. All right, so I'm just carefully getting off some of these guard petals. Great. So I'm ready to go. Just cutting my stems again down to length. And I'm gonna pop these into my long and low. One little trick as you add stems into your long and low, it's great to only hold your stem or your flower by the stem if you can. You want to avoid trying to push your flower in by the face because 2 things could happen. You could accidentally snap off the head of the rose, and that's a problem. You can't salvage that. Or you may be kind of mashing the face of your flower and it may be bruising. When you bruise a flower, oftentimes they look totally fine at first, and it's like 5 or 6 hours later that they start showing signs of overhandling. So if you can, remember to insert them by the stem, which feels a little bit awkward when you first do it. It's definitely more natural to try to push it in by the face of the flower, but your flowers will thank you later. So I'm gonna do a spin so that you can see how this is kind of taking shape. So our next ingredient that we're going to pop in is one of my favorite spray rose varieties, and this is like a miniature version of the Queen's Crown. So this is called Blue Moon, and I'm just ripping off all the leaves. I always love when there are no thorns on a stem, like these are thornless spray roses, and you can go really nice and fast. With the spray roses, there are a zillion guard petals to condition, so oftentimes I'll just pull off like the really yuck looking ones, and I'll kind of cheat with these guys. Yeah, I'm not gonna do too thorough of a job. Or sometimes I'll even pop the flower into the vase and kind of see how it's resting at the end of the design, because sometimes the guard petals will be obscured by another flower or leaf, and I don't need to remove them all. So I'm going to cut my stem at a nice deep angle, and I'm just gonna pop these in wherever I've got an open void in my design. And I'm just gonna say this because I can't see what you are doing at home, obviously, but I know a lot of designers struggle with adding lots and lots of their beautiful flowers to the top of the design, but not focusing enough attention low down. So at this point, as we're putting in our spray roses, just do an eyeball and see if you're one of those designers, if you've like top loaded your design and if you need to pull some things down lower. Spray roses would be an awesome thing to pull lower down in your arrangement. All right, perfect. So now we're gonna add our fun little fill flowers. We've got a couple of things to work with. So the first, we're going to pop in some ranunculus. And if you look at my ranunculus, I've got some little buds hanging off. Just gonna pull these off. Your buds are not really gonna open at this point. If the stem is long enough and you feel like you like the texture of having some buds, you can certainly add them into your design, but otherwise I would just stick to your ranunculus. And this is a flower that I like to let kind of hang a little bit taller than the other flowers so that it's not lost. So see, I've given my ranunculus like an extra ½ inch over the roses in hydrangea, so he's more visible. So let's go ahead and add our ranuncs. You do want to make sure that the angle that you're putting your ranunculus in and the distance is pronounced. You don't want to wind up with two little eyeballs since they're such round flowers. So I like to put them in at slightly different heights and different angles so I don't wind up with like a pair of eyes watching me from across the room. And then the next flower that we're going to add in is, this makes my top 5 list, and I don't know why, but I love clematis dearly. We use it all the time in our shop. So we've got some clematis to poke in, and if you've got a clematis like mine where you've got laterals that are lower, you could separate your piece of clematis. So I just cut out the top portion, and now I've got still the long stem beneath. So you can poke this in all over your design, and I think the clematis is just such a beautiful, airy flower. Clematis does grow locally. A lot of people will throw it up on a trellis in their backyard, or you'll notice in Virginia or in the DMV, clematis growing on mailboxes in particular. And it's just such a beautiful bell-shaped flower. So I'm just working this in. There's something about the clematis that breaks up the weight of the roses. Like the roses in hydrangea are definitely heavier, bulkier flowers, and the clematis has an airy feel to it, so it's a nice complement to the other ingredients in our design. Okay. All right, so I've got all of my clematis popped in, looking beautiful. And then my last ingredient, I saved flowering Ariostemon for last because it is just a magical band-aid for design. So you can use this to fill and plug any holes that you have. You can elongate your design a little bit. So I'm gonna put some that kind of sprays out the side. It has a beautiful citrus smell to it, so you can enjoy that as you work with it. And just feels really nice and natural. So you don't have to use it all, it's up to you how much you want to use, but I'm just going to mix in a couple of pieces here and there. Okay. There we go. All right, so I'm happy with that amount of coverage. And then the last little thing that we've got, I love a little bit of Easter kitsch. So everyone should have some butter yellow eggs and some hyacinth steaks. And I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. Apparently I have an Ariostemon allergy. So we're gonna take our hyacinth steaks, I'm just cutting them in half. And I'm gonna take the steak and gently just poke it into the bottom of my egg. So now I've got an egg on a stick. And I'm just gonna poke in my eggs, just nestle them into my long and low. And I think this is so cute for Easter. I hope you like it too. I also have used this trick, I know it sounds silly, but I love Brussels sprouts, little Brussels sprouts tucked into long and lows for Easter. So if you don't love the eggs, you can also pick up Brussels sprouts and just tuck them in all over. They look like little baby cabbages from the garden, so really cute. But I think that's just such a fun hidden surprise for kids, especially if you have any kids at your Easter table. I think they'll appreciate the eggs. So that's the long and low. If you have any questions about what you've made, just shoot us a message. We are super active on our Instagram channel and on our YouTube channel, so you can DM us or comment on the video. For keeping this guy happy and fresh until the holiday, the most important thing that you can possibly do for your long and low is to add fresh water daily. So you can do that by just putting the entire arrangement under your kitchen sink and letting water flow in until it's overflowing the vase. Short of that, cut flowers hate direct sunlight, so definitely keep these guys out of a really bright and sunny window or a hot spot, because we're finally in warm weather season, so it is a real problem for cut flowers. And if you notice anything starts to take a poop, just pull it out. All of the flowers have very different base lives, and it's always tough to say if a flower has gotten like a hurt stem as you arrange, so it's common that 1 or 2 blooms might perish, but you have so much in this vase that you should still have a beautiful centerpiece by the time Sunday rolls around. I hope you guys enjoy a fantastic Easter, and I hope your flowers are a topic of conversation and joy for all of your guests, and we look forward to seeing you for the next workshop. Thanks so much.